So I asked you here because I need to do a recap for our session 2, which, as we know, I failed to record due to operator error. And I just wanted a little help remembering the events. And John can't be with us here because he's busy this week, but I do want to get this out there. So at the end of session 1 was where you had fought those raiders, and you had pretty much wrapped them up, and you
Yeah.
were looking at figuring out exactly what was going on in that situation at this Tobin homestead,
Right.
where you had received this distress call. And so, like, how do you remember what?
So I'll go ahead and go through my notes. Um,
Okay.
I do remember that we had, after the fight, we had uh, tried to contact the people who had been sending the distress
Right.
mail. So what I have here in my notes is so PRDF was down. So there was sort of a time. I think there was a time crunch when the PRDF.
Yeah, right, correct. I had your, section leader inform you that, and that's Peace River. The Peace River is one of the other political powers in the setting, and they were notionally, or at least in their opinion, they're in charge of what goes on in that sector of the world, and so they were sending a squad, and you had been instructed to get done and leave before they got there because the regiment didn't want to engage or have a situation with them.
Right. We spoke to the people on the farm, and what I have here is that the Nellis clan had been taxing protection money from homesteaders. So the people in the gears had been
Right.
at some point, I think, getting protection money from homesteaders.
Right, and and I'm not sure if I made this clear enough, but it's just that the Daenerys Raiders the Daenerys clan just considered themselves to be the legitimate political authority in that area. So
Um, After that, is the marshal of the area had been checking people. Did we speak to the marshal? I'm trying to remember if we did or not.
you spoke to him and his wife. Now John handled most of that with his character Fika, and I do remember that fairly well, and I can sort of talk about what was happening there. You did take one of the raiders prisoner, and I don't remember if he was very talkative or if he had filled in any context for you, or if you recall anything interesting with him.
Not really.
No.
I don't think that he gave us much
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
I think we brought his gear in tow, if that was correct.
Yeah, that's right. You kind of salvaged his guy. You put him in it. You locked him in it in order to
Yes, right.
drag him
Right,
back
yep.
to base. While Fico was talking to the leaders of the homestead, and so with that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no! I was going to say my impression, or Chalk's impression, was that the homesteaders wanted to make friends with us, and that they have been essentially smuggling booze to make money to free their son, or to get their son out of somewhere.
Uh,
Um,
yeah.
even though they don't like it, or my notes say that they do not like. They didn't like it, but they do it because it's profitable.
Right. So they were, and this sort of came out pretty quickly. So I think Fleas and Dusty searched the homestead under orders from Section, and they did discover that there was a bunch of contraband liquor in the homestead. And as I was explaining, it was destined to be sold in black markets in the Northern Lights Confederation, because there's this whole I sort of tried to contextualize this, fundamentalist culture that was taking shape in the Northern Lights Confederation, where your characters are from, and sort of like hard liquor is illegal there. This is not necessarily directly from the book, or the book implies that there are strict moral controls on things like alcohol, but I kind of decided that the line was like somewhere around hard liquor or maybe fortified wine, right? Like, and down is illegal outright. And so I was trying to give a little context. I wanted this to sort of express something about the maybe cultural difference between the cultural experiences with your character, Chalk, and Fika. So I tried to express this idea of like Chalk remembering a time when the culture was much less strict about this kind of thing, and having seen it get more fundamentalist in her lifetime.
Right, right. That I do remember as well. That that there is that dichotomy.
Right.
That there's that kind of dichotomy there.
Right, and of course, John's character Fika is several years younger and just grew up, in that world, in this fundamentalist world, and so go ahead.
So I'm trying to remember what the conflict with Fleas was. Did we? Somebody put a grenade into the booze.
Well,
but
Fleas wanted to.
Right. Okay.
He just wanted to destroy it outright, and in theory, that would have been the correct policy for your mission would have been to destroy it outright. But Fika had been talking to the people and was sort of sympathetic to their story, which as you implied, was that they were just serving it as a depot, as a holding depot for a smuggling gang that was operating in the area, and they had basically done it right because they needed the money, because their son was involved with the Badlands Revolutionary Front, and so he was a political prisoner in Peace River, and they were trying to pay for a lawyer to keep in contact with, make sure his rights were being respected. And I don't know if they necessarily actually had much hope of him getting out, but they wanted to make sure he didn't just disappear right into a permanent detention. And so they told this story to John, or to John's character. And now, while that was happening, I made 2 human perception rolls for Teva Nayani, who was the wife of the marshal, and who was sort of ended up taking the lead in the conversation. And the first one was successful, and it let her intuit that that your squad had already found the liquor. And so that influenced how she approached the conversation. She realized she wasn't going to be able to try to cover up what was going on, so she immediately switched into trying to present her case sympathetically. Now, the second roll I made for her was to see if she figured out that something was up with why the Northern squad was clearing out so fast. In other words, was she going to figure out from their behavior that Peace River was heading their way? And she did not. That was a failure. And so that's actually what led to the second mission, where, or that's how I interpreted that as leading to the second mission, where Peace River had in fact seen the aftermath of the fight and just arrested them and took them in and was using them for intelligence. And that's how, pardon me, I believe that all came out ultimately by the end of the second combat mission. You would have figured out that that's what had happened. But so But so those were the two rolls I made, and that was what was going on from my end of that conversation. From John's end, right, he was trying to figure out, he was sort of sympathetic to the idea that these homesteaders were just trying to make a living, and they were getting it from, every side, from these local authorities or chieftains from Peace River, and now from the north coming in. And so he kind of offered them this escape valve where he said, well, we're gonna let it slide for now. We're gonna let you slide, but you have to destroy that liquor, and it better not be there when we come back. With the implication that they would, of course, you haven't come back because they're gone now, and
Right.
that was the sort of effect of that failed roll. And that was something that it took me a while. It took me about a week. It's been taking me about a solid week to digest the events of our sessions, and then thinking about it, and then by the time it's next Thursday, I'm like, wait, I know what I need to do, but I need another week to sort of let it sit. So that's why it's been about every other week. But anyway, that's what happened with respect to the homesteaders themselves. And meanwhile, you and the other squad members had sort of, wrapped up that prisoner, and you were getting ready to go. And then I had you, I sort of was trying to do a little more setting color, and I showed you sort of driving or rolling back out to this monastery where the rest of your section was waiting for you. Describe the monastery and kind of tried to describe a little more of the local culture of the area. And you sort of hooked up and went back to base. And then back at the base, you actually had a little scene with Fleas. So I had been characterizing Fleas as pretty mouthy and kind of challenging, Fika's authority several times. And then so you sort of had Chalk take him aside and give him a talking to. And hey, do you remember that conversation, or what you were thinking about that?
I do. I remember that Chalk had basically tried to subtly let him know that, it's always a good idea to back the lead. It's also, good XOs become squad leaders, and with the idea being that you can be in Fika's position yourself if you keep your nose clean.
Right. Yeah, and I think I sort of interpreted him as being a little cowed by that. You were sort of speaking his language in terms of, authority and playing by the rules, so he kind of didn't have a snappy comeback for once, and, went away chasing. So, and I don't recall if John had Fika do anything specific on base, unfortunately. I do have next our third session where he did quite a bit, but for the remainder of that session, I don't remember if anything happened after that talk between Chalk and Fleas.
I know we had a debriefing.
That's true.
Debriefing. The section leader, I'm guessing that's Crusher, right?
Yeah, that's Crusher. Although I don't think I had named him yet, but.
Right.
But yeah.
So it was Crusher had debriefed us, and my notes say that the briefing went okay. So I seem to remember that Crusher was like, well, you probably should have, good job, but you probably should have, destroyed that stuff.
Yeah. I played him as I tried to play him as sympathetic to, the decision that Fika had made, and was kind of saying, well, ground pounders shouldn't have to make those kinds of decisions if it were up to me. But regulations wise, yes, you probably should have. But it sounded like he was, and I think I decided that he was going to try to take the heat for that. If there was going to be heat, he was going to try to cover for her and take the heat himself if necessary. And I don't think I think that pretty much sums it up as far as I can recall.
It looks like I've noticed I downloaded battle reports from the captured gear because I think I was trying to find out where it had been.
Oh yeah. I think I did tell you that it was a. I don't know if I really followed up on that ever that well. I think I did tell you that it was an Alliance War of the Alliance era Jaeger.
Yes.
And that you could intuit that they had been buying these decommissioned Jaegers from the south. The local chieftains had.
Right.
But I think that's kind of just background color. That's just something you would know would have been a common occurrence in the years after the War of the Alliance. So not necessarily a high priority,
Right.
thing.
Although I think probably for Chalk, that bit of information, which you probably would have passed on to the intelligence types,
Right.
Meeting with her other buddy. Of course, this is all later on. Farm boy, and then the Earth guy in the village or in the city. Those things are not. I wouldn't say necessarily weighing on her mind, but sort of. It's like, wow, I thought I left all this behind, and here we are, still dealing with this.
Right. Okay, yeah, that's good to know.